Welcome to this Thursday edition of the Day Fantasy 5. Today is July 18th. This is episode 148, and I'm your host, Scott Grierson. We're going to bring you the 5 things you need to know, and we do that every day in the world of fantasy sports. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Chris Paul, Mike Trout, and Ezekiel Elliott, and then we'll get into our sleepers for the fantasy football wide receiver position. We'll do that all after we talk about our sponsor, www.mathradio.com, where you can pick up an online math course for as little as $9.99 to help out your kids ages 7 through 17 do better in math, get higher scores on exams, and even get into college. Once again, visit www.mathradio.com for a risk-free membership. Go ahead, sign up today for as little as $10. www.mathradio.com, 30-day money-back guarantee. Sign up now, mathradio.com. All right. Let's get into it today. So it has been announced, there was an article on ESPN anyway, that Chris Paul will be likely to stay with Oklahoma City as Oklahoma City could not come up with a trade for point guard all-star Chris Paul. So what does that mean for fantasy terms? Well, I think it's actually an improvement for Chris Paul's fantasy numbers. In Houston, he was definitely the second or third fiddle at most times behind James Harden. Here, he should be the number one guy. He should get to run point and kind of do things his way. I think Oklahoma City actually has some decent talent. If you look at their big men, they have SGA. They have a lot of other pieces. I think they could be in competition for that 8-9 seed, and Chris Paul could put up some very good numbers. I think it's totally possible. So I like it for Chris Paul. I don't like it for SGA. Yeah, Alexander. Shea Alexander. Let's just call him that. So if Chris Paul is going to be starting, he's going to play off ball. That will certainly hurt his numbers and his development a little bit. I would expect Chris Paul to have a very good first half of the season. Then they try to trade him away at the trade deadline. That would be my prediction for the situation. Okay, our second story of the day is that Mike Trout is expecting and hopeful to be back today after that, a calf strain? Yeah, so it seems like he's going to be fine. He hopes to play tonight. That's good news for the Angels and Trout owners. Our next story is that Ezekiel Elliott is considering holding out for training camp. Now, the speculation is that he's only considering holding out for training camp. He's not considering actually holding out for the regular season. So I don't think there's really anything to worry about here. I don't think we have a Bell situation on our hands. However, he has 2 years left on his contract. Does he have a little bit of leverage? I guess. I wouldn't be too worried about it. I have moved him down. He was my number one running back last week. I'm going to move him down to number 4 right now. I'm considering moving him down to number 5, actually. So I just don't like this kind of I want my top pick to be absolutely 100% rock solid. And I think McCaffrey, I think Kamara, I think Barkley, they're all top solid. I've been buying more into David Johnson by the day. He's actually moved in front of the wide receivers for me as 5th overall. He might move up to number 4. I might move Zeke back to number 5. So I'm not sure about that yet, but I definitely moved the other 3 studs in front of him. I might be moving Johnson ahead of him as well. So that is it for the football news of the day. Also, I forgot to mention this. Tight end Herndon from the New York Jets. He's going to be out, I think, suspended for the first 5-6 games of the season. So don't be drafting him. I know I touted him a couple weeks ago when we were doing tight ends. So no. Avoid that guy on the Jets. All right. So let's talk about sleeper wide receivers today. I got 3 different groups that I want to go through. First, I have 3 guys that you can draft in the 8th or 9th round of a 12-team auction. Okay. Then we have a couple that are a little bit later. I have 3 guys you can pick up in the 10th or 11th rounds. And then I have some super sleepers. So these are for your deep teams. If you're in best ball, if you're playing with a deeper depth chart or have more teams in your league. So from the 15th ranked round on, these are guys that you can pick up in the 180s, 190s, ADP, something like that. So in our highest group, I have 3 guys that you need to pick up in the 8th or 9th round. Okay, obviously you don't need all of them, but as your kind of 4th wide receiver, I love having one of these guys. I have Corey Davis, who I've talked a lot about. He's in my top 20 from Tennessee. He's being drafted on draft.com for their best ball at 89.2. I love Geronimo Allison. I liked him at the beginning of this process, and then I was a little bit worried that Valdez Scandling, or whatever his name is, was going to take over the number 2 job. But I think it's going to be Geronimo Allison from everything I'm hearing and reading out of Green Bay. So I think Geronimo Allison gets that number 2 spot, and that's going to be valuable in a Rodgers-led offense. So he's going at pick 92.7. And yeah, I think he's got a lock on the number 2 spot. And then another number one receiver, like we talked a lot about why I like Corey Davis as the unquestioned number one receiver with upside. Cortland Sutton, he had a great rookie year last year out of Denver. I think he's unquestionably the number one wide receiver, and he's being drafted as 96.1. So I know Denver might not have the best passing game this season, but Cortland Sutton, if he's the number one guy there, should put up great numbers, especially in a best ball format where you might not know when to depend on him, but he should have some really big games. So those are the three guys I like. Davis at 89.2, Allison 92.7, and Sutton 96.1. I'd recommend reserving one spot. You can pick up one of these guys late in either 8th or 9th round to serve as your, fourth wide receiver. That can really help with team construction when you have a pick in the bank, that late. That can really help you out. Okay, now let's talk about some deeper sleepers, some guys with some more question marks around them. I'm going to start this. These are guys I'm going to draft in like the maybe 10th, 11th round. They're going in the 130s in ADP. Let's start with one that's not so risky. I'm going to talk about Tyrell Williams. He is the obvious number 2 wide receiver in Oakland. He had a great year in they're not San Diego anymore, Los Angeles. He had a great year with the Los Angeles Chargers. I think he's a good wide receiver with Antonio Brown there. He should be open all the time, not see any double coverage, and Carr should hit him early and often. He seems like a very safe choice to kind of have as your, 4th, 5th wide receiver. I like that a lot. Okay, now, if you want to go for some more upside, here's 2 guys I have. Second-year player Anthony Miller from the Chicago Bears. All right, he's going as pick number 138. Tyrell Williams was 134 if I didn't mention it. So Anthony Miller, the problem with him is he has a lot of competition. The Bears have like 4 guys ahead of him on the depth chart right now. Maybe they're not ahead of him, but he's battling with like 4 different guys. Now, Allen Robinson obviously is the number 1 in Chicago, but that number 2 spot is up in the air. And Anthony Miller last year with Trubisky caught 7 touchdowns on 54 targets. That's pretty good. Now, the bad part about Anthony Miller is his catch rate was only 61%. But really, going into his second year this year, I can definitely see Anthony Miller having a big jump. Okay. Couldn't you just see the 54 targets becoming 75, 80 targets? Maybe he stays the same with 7 touchdowns, but picks up an extra 200 yards. To me, that all seems very plausible. And as your 4th, 5th wide receiver, that's a great guy to have, in my opinion. So I like Anthony Miller. And then if he does claim that number 2 spot, his targets could go up to like 100, and then you're really cooking with gas. So I like Anthony Miller out of Chicago. All right, who else do we have here? So a bigger risk here. I have Paris Campbell. He's actually being drafted higher than these other 2 players at number 132 because I think he has the biggest upside. So Indianapolis is T.Y. Hilton and then a bunch of kind of garbage. I think they have Funches. They have a couple other guys that just aren't great, really, and they're injured and just not that good. Paris Campbell could win that number 2 wide receiver job. It seems certainly plausible. And if he's out there, he's going to have single coverage, of course. And he is a deep threat for Andrew Luck. At Ohio State, he had 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns as a senior. Okay. I'm not saying he's going to put up 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in the NFL. But next to T.Y. Hilton, he will not see the double coverage. So I would assume that if he can beat his man deep, right, in single coverage, there will not be that safety help over the middle to guard Paris Campbell's man because they will have to stay with T.Y. Hilton. So if he does win that job, I think he's going to win a lot of home runs and go out there. Maybe he has 2 or 3 games where he puts up, 2 touchdowns, 20-plus fantasy points for you. Now, in regular fantasy, that might not be so valuable because you never know really when Paris Campbell might, pop off. But in best ball format, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, Paris Campbell is certainly a guy I want to target. But with rookies, inconsistency is the problem. So that's why he's rated way back here in the 10th and 11th rounds. Okay. Now, here's my sleepers, my super deep guys. These guys are going, in the 190s and the 200s. I love both of them. I would recommend picking them up in the 15th round or earlier if you're playing a standard, draft, pick them up in the 14th. Okay, my first guy is Zay Jones. I feel like I'm out on an island here. Nobody else likes Zay Jones, and I don't know why. He had a good year last year. I've talked about him a bunch before. He was actually 12th in fantasy points per target last year. That's just crazy, okay? And this is the kind of upside you can get at pick 204. It's just nuts. Grab Zay Jones. I think he's the number 1 wide receiver in Buffalo. Well, you say, what's that worth? Josh Allen can't really throw the ball. Well, Josh Allen can throw the ball deep, and Zay Jones can run really, really, really fast and catch those balls and put up big games. So I love Zay Jones. It's one of my last picks in the draft. I actually haven't owned him that much this year, but I'm going to start pounding Zay Jones late in drafts. I think, I wouldn't mind having him as my fourth, fifth wide receiver. He's not some guy that I'm just stashing as like my seventh guy at the end of the bench. I plan on drafting and playing Zay Jones. I think it's a really good value. Okay. My strategy. I like to take my super consistent guys up top, get my two big wide receivers in the first 3 rounds, but then I can wait, until the 8th round to take another guy. And that's what I've been doing lately. And Zay Jones is a big part of that out of Buffalo. The final guy I want to talk about today is David Moore. I love this guy as well. He's being drafted at 193 over at draft.com. I think he's the obvious number 2 wide receiver behind TJ Lockett in Seattle. Now, Seattle, they don't throw the ball that often, but they still throw the ball at times. Yes, DK Metcalf is there. They drafted him with a 2nd-round pick, which makes me less nervous. I know he's still the same player, but if you draft him with a 1st-round pick and spend that much capital, you feel like you have to use him. Now he's more of a luxury, right? If David Moore is the more reliable and better player, David Moore is going to get the playing time over a 2nd-round pick, whereas that might not have been the case with a 1st-round pick. So that's one reason I like David Moore a lot in Seattle. Let's see here. He's very similar to Anthony Miller. He had 5 touchdowns on 53 targets last year. I would not be shocked because Lockett is not a guy who gets a lot of targets. He does a lot with his targets, but he doesn't get a lot of them. I think David Moore might actually lead this team in targets this year and put up very, very nice numbers, even from an offense that doesn't throw the ball very much. So those are my deep sleepers for wide receiver. As far as the list goes, my top 20 is pretty much the same. Not much has changed there from a couple weeks ago. So I hope you enjoyed the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to spend most of the time, we'll go through the news, whatever news there is, but then we're going to spend the day talking about what exactly is this best ball format that I am new to this year. And many of you probably don't know about either. It's really fun. You make the draft and then you're done. I love it. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Please check out the sponsor, www.mathradio.com, to pick up an online math class for $9.99. Give us a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes or Spotify, and hit subscribe on YouTube. See you tomorrow.